My boyfriend and best friend crossed the line. They kissed while I slept, kept it a secret for months, and now they're trying to fix everything. My boyfriend, 24M, and I, 24F, have been together since we were 17. We basically grew up side by side, from awkward high schoolers to actual adults trying to build a life together. When we met, it felt like one of those rare, once-in-a-lifetime connections. Everything just clicked. Our relationship has never been just about romance. It's always been built on trust, deep friendship, and mutual support. He was there through all the chaos. College applications, late-night cramming sessions, and the whole terrifying process of figuring out what adulthood even means. When I got into a university in another state, I was terrified it might be the beginning of the end for us. But he didn't even hesitate. "I'll follow you wherever you go," he told me. And he actually did. He packed up his entire life, left behind his family and friends, and moved just to be with me. He worked random jobs to support himself while I focused on school, always making sure I had everything I needed to succeed. During finals, he'd stay up with me, bring me snacks, make me tea, and remind me to breathe. He believed in me even when I doubted myself. When I decided to pursue my master's, he was just as supportive. He never made me feel like my goals were too much or that I should slow down for the sake of our relationship. Instead, he encouraged me to go after what I wanted without holding back. As we grew together, we started making bigger moves. We bought our first house, a small but perfect place that immediately felt like home. It was a huge step, our first real milestone as partners, and it symbolized everything we were building together. He even insisted on covering the mortgage himself. "You worked so hard for your degrees," he told me. "Let me take care of this part." I still contributed to other expenses, but the fact that he was willing to take on such a big responsibility said everything about how much he cared. Then came our dog, our chaotic, lovable little furball, who instantly became the center of our world. We decorated the house, made it our own, and spent late nights talking about the future. Kids, travel, careers, it all felt like it was falling into place. The thing is, we've always given each other space. We're not the type to check phones or ask for constant updates about each other's whereabouts. I love my independence, and so does he, and I never had any reason to doubt him. But trust isn't just about your relationship, it's about everyone you let into your life. And for me, that included my best friend. We've known each other for 12 years, basically forever. She was there through everything. Sleepovers, heartbreaks, embarrassing moments, and all the cringy phases of growing up. When my parents fought, she was the person I vented to. When her first boyfriend shattered her heart, I stayed up all night plotting imaginary revenge with her. She wasn't just my best friend. She was my sister in every way except blood. She knew everything about me. Every milestone, every secret, every detail I wouldn't tell anyone else. She was there when I got my first kiss, when I graduated, when I moved into my house with my boyfriend. She was the first person I called when I landed my dream job. The first person I texted when we adopted our dog. Her opinion has always mattered. If I was stuck on something, I'd go to her for advice, even if I knew she'd tell me what I didn't want to hear. I trusted her completely. I wanted her and my boyfriend to get along because they were the two most important people in my life. And they did. Maybe a little too well. Recently, my best friend's life turned into pure chaos. She jumped into a whirlwind relationship with some guy she barely knew, moved in with him after just a few months, got engaged almost immediately, then eloped without telling anyone. Within a year, it was all over. They got divorced just as fast as they got together. It happened so quickly that I barely had time to process any of it. What's wild is that I never even met the guy. By the time we had a chance to catch up, it was already done. She told me he had been controlling, emotionally abusive, and had completely isolated her from everyone who cared about her. Hearing what she had gone through broke my heart. I felt guilty for not realizing how bad things had gotten. After everything fell apart, she came to stay at my place for a few nights. It felt like old times, just the two of us talking late into the night. I wanted to be there for her, to remind her she wasn't alone, and honestly, I thought this could be our chance to reconnect after the distance her relationship had put between us. That night was one of those rare, perfect moments. It was late fall, the air was crisp, and the three of us, me, my boyfriend, and my best friend, sat outside by the fire, just talking. We had a few drinks, nothing crazy, just enough to relax and feel a little nostalgic. I remember looking at them and feeling so grateful that the two most important people in my life got along so well. It had been a long time since I'd seen my best friend like this. Her messy relationship and divorce had kept her away, and I missed the days when we could just sit and talk for hours. I leaned over to my boyfriend at one point and said, "I'm so glad she's here. I've missed her so much." He smiled and agreed, saying it was nice to see me happy. We sat there for hours, reminiscing and laughing. She and I swapped stories from our childhood, and my boyfriend would chime in with his usual playful remarks about how reckless we used to be. Everything about that night felt right. Around 1 a.m., the cold started getting to me, so I told them I was heading inside to warm up for a bit. It wasn't weird for me to leave them alone. I trusted them both completely. I loved that they got along, and I never had any reason to doubt either of them. I went inside, sat on the couch to pet our dog, and checked my phone. The house was warm and quiet, and I didn't realize how exhausted I was until I started dozing off. I only meant to rest for a few minutes, but the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of the back door opening. My boyfriend walked in first, my best friend right behind him. They seemed completely normal, no weird tension, no awkwardness, nothing that set off alarm bells. "We're heading to bed," my boyfriend said casually. "You coming?" Still half asleep, I nodded, and we all said goodnight. She left the next morning after breakfast, and we promised to stay in touch more. Everything felt fine. Then, a few days later, my boyfriend came to me with his phone in his hand. "Hey," he said, looking a little confused. "Your friend just messaged me on Snapchat. She's asking when she can come over again." At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I read the message, and something about it felt off. Why was she messaging him directly instead of me? If she wanted to make plans, why not text her best friend of over a decade? I asked him, "Did she say why she messaged you and not me?" He shrugged. "No, but I thought it was weird too." He didn't seem particularly bothered, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Later that day, I called my mom just to talk it through. "I don't want to make this a bigger deal than it is," I told her. She was quiet for a moment before saying, "I think it's strange too, but maybe it's nothing. Why don't you just ask your friend? It might clear the air." But I didn't ask. I didn't want to sound paranoid or accusatory. I trusted them both, so I told myself I was just overthinking it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. It wasn't just that she messaged him. It was the tone. It felt casual in a way that almost seemed intentional, like she was bypassing me completely. And why was she so eager to come over again so soon? A couple of days later, I mentioned it to my boyfriend again. He reassured me, "I don't think it's a big deal. She probably just wanted to make plans and figured I'd pass it along." I nodded, trying to push away the unease. But something about it just didn't sit right with me. A few weeks later, I decided to reach out to her myself. I texted her, suggesting we hang out and catch up. At first, she seemed excited. "I'd love to," she replied right away. We tossed around a few possible dates, but when the time came, she bailed. Something about her work schedule being hectic. She promised we'd reschedule, but we never did. I tried not to read too much into it. Life gets busy. People get overwhelmed. But something about it nagged at me. This was my best friend, the person who used to prioritize our friendship above everything. Now, she felt distant, almost guarded, like there was something she wasn't saying. Looking back, that Snapchat message was the first crack. At the time, I didn't fully understand why it bothered me so much, but now, I can't stop thinking about it. She messaged him because she wanted to see him again, and she was testing the waters to see if he'd be okay with it. 3 months later, life kept moving. My boyfriend and I settled back into our routines. My best friend stayed distant. I convinced myself it was just life getting in the way, that maybe she was still recovering from the chaos of her marriage and divorce. I told myself not to take it personally. Then, out of nowhere, she texted me last week. It was a long, rambling message, full of apologies. At first, I couldn't even make sense of it. My heart started pounding as I read the words, my stomach twisting into knots. She confessed. The night she stayed over, she and my boyfriend kissed while I was inside. She said it was a moment of weakness, that it happened fast. According to her, my boyfriend pulled away immediately, told her it was wrong, and shut it down. But then she admitted. He leaned in first, and she didn't pull away. Her tone was desperate. She kept saying how sorry she was, how she was terrified of losing me. She swore it meant nothing, blamed the alcohol, and said they both agreed to keep it a secret because they thought it would be better for everyone. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking. My brain refused to process what I was reading. My best friend, my boyfriend, the two people I trusted most in the world. And they kissed while I was just a few steps away, completely oblivious. I went straight to my boyfriend. I showed him the message and demanded an explanation. His face went pale. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. "She told you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I snapped. "So what the hell happened?" He took a shaky breath and sat down, running his hands through his hair. "Okay," he admitted. "Yes, we kissed. But it's not what you think." She leaned in first, and I stopped it as soon as I realized what was happening. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. "Then why didn't you tell me?" My voice cracked. He exhaled, looking down. "Because I didn't want to hurt you." It was stupid and meaningless, and I didn't want to ruin what we have over something that didn't even matter. I laughed bitterly. You didn't want to hurt me? So instead, you lied to me for months? You let me sit here thinking everything was fine while you kept this secret? He couldn't even meet my eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know how to tell you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Did it mean anything to you? No, he said immediately. It was just a stupid, drunken mistake. I love you. I would never do anything to jeopardize that. His words should have reassured me, but they didn't. Because it wasn't just about the kiss. It was the fact that it happened at all, and that they both made the choice to keep it from me, to let me live in ignorance while they carried the weight of their secret. For months, I had trusted them. For months, I had been sitting here questioning myself, telling myself I was overthinking things. And the whole time, they had been lying. The past few days have been a blur. I can barely function. I feel betrayed, humiliated, and so alone. Normally, I would turn to my best friend or my boyfriend for support, but they're the ones who broke me. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the alcohol. Maybe my friend was vulnerable and emotional after her divorce. Maybe my boyfriend panicked and didn't know how to react. But none of that changes the fact that they crossed a line I never thought they'd even get close to. And the worst part? It's not just the kiss. It's the trust they shattered in that moment, and in the months that followed. They both decided I didn't deserve the truth. They let me doubt myself instead of coming clean. Now, I'm left wondering, can I ever move past this? Can I ever forgive them? Or has this broken something that can't be repaired? Update. After confronting both my boyfriend and my ex-best friend, I needed space to clear my head. I packed a bag and stayed at my mom's place for a few nights, trying to process everything. My emotions were all over the place. Anger, sadness, disbelief. I just couldn't wrap my head around how the two people I trusted most could do this to me. During that time, my boyfriend kept reaching out. Texts, calls, voice messages, apologizing over and over, begging for another chance. He admitted that keeping the secret was a mistake, but kept insisting that the kiss meant nothing, that he was willing to do whatever it took to fix things. Eventually, I decided to go back home and have a final conversation with him. I told him straight up. I appreciated his honesty now, but the damage had already been done. It wasn't just the kiss. It was the fact that he and my best friend chose to lie about it for months. That betrayal changed everything for me. He swore he'd do anything to rebuild my trust, that he didn't want to lose me over something that, in his words, was over before it even started. But I don't know if I can get past it. Some things, once broken, just don't go back to the way they were. As for my ex-best friend, she's out of my life for good. She sent me multiple messages, long, desperate apologies, asking for forgiveness. I haven't responded, and I don't plan to. Some betrayals are just too deep to come back from. Right now, I'm focusing on myself. I've started therapy to work through everything, to figure out what I actually want instead of just reacting to the situation. I haven't made any final decisions about my relationship yet, but one thing I do know, I deserve love that doesn't come with conditions, with lies, with hidden betrayals.